Ahead on NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
Are beef cattle prices heading up or down? How can you plan your marketing strategy? We have insights and advice from a group of experts on what you can expect from the markets for 2017 and beyond.
And now, a special edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen with host Kevin Ochsner.
Hello and welcome to NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. I'm Kevin Ochsner. Thanks for joining us. The last few years have been a roller coaster ride for cattlemen and women. We've seen market prices rise to record levels and then fall dramatically. That volatility creates uncertainty and stress for all segments of our industry. So what can we expect for 2017 and beyond? Today, we hope to provide some insights while also offering some advice on how to position yourself for the most success. And we have an experienced group of folks with us to share their thoughts on the cattle markets. First, a pleasure to introduce Kevin Good from CattleFacts. Kevin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good to be here. Basically, Kevin Good, I'm with CattleFacts. I'm the senior market analyst. On a daily basis, I cover the Kansas feed yard region. As well as that, I'm the manager of our corporate accounts.
Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
And Clint Berry comes to us from Superior Livestock. Tell us about your background.
Hi, Kevin. My wife, Jama, and I, we run a small cow-calf operation in southern Missouri, and then I market cattle for Superior Livestock as a representative, primarily specializing in cattle of known genetics, higher quality cattle, higher managed cattle.
Excellent. And also joining us is Larry Hicks from Cattle Hedging. Larry, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I have a company called CattleHedging.com, and this will be 43 years, and what we do is focus on managing risks for livestock producers in the U.S. and Canada. And we try to do a better job of allowing them to kind of look at how to identify their risk parameters and how to actually manage that risk.
Fantastic. Looking forward to hearing from you. And rounding out our panel, we have Don Close from Rabo AgriFinance. Don, tell us about your background.
Hello, Kevin. I'm the senior animal protein analyst with Rabo AgriFinance. That's part of the Food and Agribusiness Research Group that is a team of global analysts around the world.
Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, before I have some hard-hitting questions about the future, let's look backward just a little bit. We've had a bumpy ride, haven't we? And I guess my question is, explain to us the drivers of some of this volatility. Kevin, you want to start?
Well, I think as we look in the rearview mirror the last couple of years in particular, and you alluded to it, we had record price run up in 2013 and 2014, and then we've had 2 years where we've seen the market drop quite a bit. As you think about the supply side of the market, 2014 at our peak, it was kind of a perfect storm as far as things going right. We had tight beef supplies because of the liquidation we've been through the last 15 years, tight pork and poultry supplies as well. In addition to that, we had very good exports in 2014, so our per capita supplies there were as tight as we'd seen in decades. Now, as you turn the page to 2015 and 16, the opposite is true. We've got increasing supplies of beef, pork, and poultry in 2015. At the same time, exports were lower for all three proteins, so you had the biggest single year increase in per capita supplies we've ever seen in record. So there's no doubt it just wasn't beef, it was all three proteins that suffered. And a continuation of the trend again in 2016. 2016 we produced 3 billion more pounds of total protein compared to 15. But on the positive side, we did see exports start to pick up in 2016 to partially offset that increase in production. But nonetheless, bigger protein supplies with demand that, we can debate whether it's better or a little bit softer, but with bigger supplies, typically it's softer price.
And Don, you work in the finance industry. I guess my question is, did you all anticipate as steep and fast a drop as we experienced?
I don't know that anybody anticipated as fast and as steep as a drop as we have had. With that being said, given the economic environment that loan customers have had to work in, all in all, they've done a pretty good job of just keeping their senses about them. Let's get through this in a well-managed fashion. It's been a tough run.
So what has this impacted, or how has this impacted the industry at large? Larry, do you have thoughts?
I think from a risk management perspective, to tag on what Kevin said, one of the other things that went on for this dramatic volatile up and the volatile down was shift in margins. When the supplies tightened up like Kevin talks about, the producer gets margin, the cow-calf, the rancher, but we squeeze the packer, we squeeze the retailer, and at some point in time we price ourselves out of the marketplace. And as that pendulum swings back down, those margins need to expand again. And that's one of the reasons I think this collapse was steeper and faster, because not only would you have this compound increase in supply, you had these margins that had to realign themselves. And they came from extreme levels. And that shift alone made for the dramatic decline in 16.
Kind of felt like shifting the clutch, or shifting the truck without a clutch, didn't it? As we talk about the markets this last fall, I was reading an article that suggested that every potload of calves is worth about $70,000 less than a year ago. That's folding money, Clint Berry. I mean, what's your sense of what things look like for the cow-calf producer in 2017?
Well, I think you've heard the technical side of this and where our supplies are and what our demand looks like. And for a cow-calf producer, we enjoyed a couple of years there beyond our wildest belief. Now we're back to reality, and now it's time that we've got to tighten down our input cost, and we've got to focus on adding as much value, and whether that's using technologies or value-added programs or incorporating better types of beef through our protocols in our own operations. But we've got to find a way to capture as much return on those cattle as we can, because it's just a tougher margin all the way around for every segment.
And you can't squeeze blood out of a turnip, as they say. And so, everybody, including you all, have said, cattle feeders have to make some money before they can afford to spend it on calves. And Don, I guess I'd begin with you. What's the outlook for cattle feeders in the coming year?
Actually, I think cattle feeders are going to be in a much improved environment than they were in 2016. As Clint mentioned, certainly the cattle feeders, the lower price of feeder cattle, the very attractive feed grain prices we were working with, they've had an opportunity to buy inputs at a much more attractive level. You add with that the better than expected rally we've seen in the futures market post-October has actually offered some very attractive hedge opportunities for producers.
Larry, Kevin, what would you add?
Well, I think that's spot on. One thing I would suggest too, as you think about it, there's three factors that we look at as far as cattle feeding, getting in current, and also the market being an overachiever. And as you think about where we're at today, cattle are making money that are leaving the feed yard. That's positive. You also have a big discount in the deferred futures. That's positive because it tells the cattle feeder to continue to market cattle. And also we're buying a break even on feeder cattle that's $10 plus lower than the cattle we're selling out of the feed yard today, a positive swap. And typically when those three factors line up, Kevin, you typically pull cattle forward, market at lighter weights, you become more current, you have more leverage compared to the packing segment, and the market typically is an overachiever, and cattle feeder typically stays profitable more longer as we go through the year. So we're pretty optimistic that 2017 will be a plus year for the cattle feeder.
You agree, Larry?
Well, I'd like to add, we've taken retail beef as a percent of retail pork from almost 200% to less now. We've realigned some of this competitive side with the pork side, and I think that's helpful. I think retail prices of beef are still going to have to come lower, and as it comes lower, we're going to have to see still with this increased production for 2017 some lower prices, but the margins have changed. This big collapse of our consolidation of the retail margins, the packer margins, is now going to reduce the risk, I think, with respect to the margin for the feedlot. Who's going to have more of a challenge is cow-calf and rancher is we still need to get those prices down to where the cattle feeders lost a lot of equity this last couple of years.
He's got to regain
so
some
he's
of
got to, he's going to be a lot more cautious about what he pays for that replacement animal.
Let's talk quickly about the fundamentals of beef demand. I mean, do you believe that we have strong beef demand? Kevin?
I'll kick that off, and as you look at the academic part of demand, it's just quantity times price.
Yep.
And if you did that for 2016, for example, all fresh retail prices were down 6%, and per capita beef supplies were up 3%. So if you do the math there, that would tell you that beef demand was down about 3%. And so if you look at beef demand, I think you also have to recognize, and Larry makes some very good points about the price structure between us and the other proteins. We have been expensive compared to both pork and poultry. That is coming down some. So if you look at demand in different aspects, right now we're seeing more featuring, and the featured price for beef in 2016 was down 10%, not the 5 to 6% that all fresh was. So you can see the retailers seeing the advantage of featuring beef at a bigger discount to get the consumer in. You can also see some differences between the product side. The rib and the loin, the middles, choice and above steak items have gotten along extremely well. They've held their value together better than the chuck and the round and the grind as we think about 2016. So if we look at it from a long haul, yeah, demand from an academic standpoint is probably down some, but at the same time, there's some bright spots out there for demand.
Larry?
I'd like to add to that. One of the things I think I noticed and watched the summer of 2014, but by Labor Day of 2014, we had priced ourselves out of the marketplace in the beef, okay? And I think that's, a lot of people talk, well, demand was really good then, but really if we compare it to the elasticity of demand, I think the retailer overshot elasticity. And so instead of what people interpreted as good demand, I think we weaned demand. I think we took and weaned that demand away, and that made the consequences of 2015 and 2016 more significant because we weaned that demand away.
That's interesting. Great discussion, and we're going to dig a little deeper into this important topic throughout our program today. Now, if you want to keep up on all the latest news in the cattle industry, just visit NCBA's website, that's beefusa.org. And for more expert analysis on the cattle market, be sure to visit cattlefacts.com. Still ahead on NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen, our panel will offer their advice on changes producers can make to try to capture more dollars. Plus, we'll get their thoughts on corn crop prices and the impact they could have on the beef industry. Stay with us. We'll be back right after this.
Are you looking for Angus bulls that can work in all kinds of range conditions? Then look to the proven genetics offered by Riverbend Ranch in Idaho Falls, Idaho. Their Genetic Edge bull sale takes place Saturday, March 11, 2017 at 11 a.m. And they'll offer proven Angus bulls that do the job in the toughest country, guaranteed. Outstanding herd sires have given Riverbend the Genetic Edge. Don't miss their 2017 sale. Find out more at the website riverbendranch.us.
What does it mean to be dependable? It means you do what you say you'll do time and time again. Because performance isn't optional, and your task is essential. For over 95 years, we have proven ourselves to be the most dependable choice. That's why the cattlemen of this great nation trust Ritchie to provide fresh water on demand. Ritchie, proud to be a partner to the American cattlemen since 1921.
Don't miss the 2017 NCBA Legislative Conference in Washington, D.C. It's your opportunity to meet with key congressional and federal agency influencers and let them know where cattlemen and women stand on critical issues that impact the cattle business and our way of life. Make plans to be in Washington, D.C. March 28th through the 30th for the 2017 NCBA Legislative Conference. Together, we can do more. Details at beefusa.org.
Welcome back to this special edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen, as we hear from a group of industry experts on what producers can do to better manage the uncertainty in the cattle markets. Guys, I'll tell you, I can't hardly go to a meeting or pick up a publication talking about the last couple of years without somebody addressing the issue of carcass weights and the size of these carcasses. What kind of impact has that had on our industry?
I think the big thing, and Kevin talked about it in our previous one, and that has to do with supply. It's that second ingredient to the kill in the number of cattle, right? But the question I think better should be addressed is, what are we placing? Last year, you placed a calf or a lightweight animal, it lost a lot more money because you bought them high, you had a long downtrend. So the calf fed. So what you're doing is you're placing this heavier weight animal and you're going to take them to a heavier weight finish weight, and that's going to add tonnage to the marketplace. So until the economics are there to feed a lighter weight animal, we're going to put on feed a heavier weight animal, take them bigger, put more production, and pressure prices.
Don?
I agree. Certainly we've seen the long-term trend for heavier carcass weights over the last 50 years. And if you break that down, when we get in difficult market conditions, as Larry talked about, all participants in the market are paid on pounds. So if the market cannot return what the producer needs with price, the only opportunity is to increase that productivity, generating more pounds.
But you did say we are more current than we were. Is that fair, Kevin?
Definitely is the case. As we look at carcass weights, actually carcass weights started to run below a year ago through the second half of 2016, and we talk about those three cardinal rules that we look at: profitability, the discount futures, and a good swap on feeder cattle. It typically tells the cattle producer to pull cattle forward. So we are seeing that the last few months. Weights are starting to decline. They're still historically heavy. As alluded to, we are paid on pounds, but we're also starting to see, because we've got plenty of cattle, in fact, excess cattle for capacity at certain times of the year, especially in the fourth quarter, where the packers can now put on heavier discounts for heavyweight cattle. They can be choosier. And because of those heavier discounts, we are starting to see some of the top side of those weights come down. You know, if you look at it from a long-term perspective, carcass weights increase about 5 pounds per year over the last 30 years. The next couple of years where we're at in the cattle cycle, because of large supplies number-wise, don't be surprised if carcass weights start to plateau short-term, because the leverage component, there'll be enough discounts on heavyweight cattle that it will tell the cattle feeder, let's short day them a little bit.
Yeah, that's interesting. Clint, you talk to a lot of people, help a lot of folks market their cattle, and I guess what guidance or advice would you give in positioning ourselves for 2017 in terms of these markets?
Well, I think it goes back to what we talked about before. I mean, step number one is going to be controlling your input costs to the best of your ability. And then in my mind, it's utilizing the technologies we have and the marketing programs available to differentiate your cattle. I talk to a lot of customers, and we survive and prosper on value-added programs that differentiate the types of cattle we have. And there's different programs for that. There's quality grade cattle that fit that, and select grade cattle that fit that. There's cattle with better average daily gains that fit a program that another one might not. But you know, we've got a lot of data that comes through our Superior system that CattleFax analyzes for us. And every year can be fluid, every year can change. It's almost like it's a living, breathing part of it. But you know, there's certain years that technology such as implanting pays very heavy. You know, there's certain years that the natural programs will give greater returns for our cattle. Export verification programs, just depending on what's going on. And the hard part about that is every program every year is going to have to be analyzed by every producer, and you don't necessarily change your entire management scheme on a ranch on a one-year basis, but you've got to be able to be fluid enough to be able to take advantage of those when they come. And that's where producers are going to have to stay engaged. And then, in my opinion, in a level to downtrending market, a cattle feeder, our buyer, wants the least amount of risk. That's better health and better genetics, and there's no substitute for that.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, go ahead, Kim.
I'll just tag in on the last two comments. We do a cow-calf survey, and every year it comes back the same. There's 3 areas where the high-return cow-calf producer spends more money in, and those are areas that pay them dividends. It's genetics, it's herd health, and nutrition, just as you pointed out. That's where $1 spent might be $2 reaped. And so those are some, I think, are tagging in with that. I think those are some good thoughts.
That's a great point. So let's talk about inputs. You mentioned feed. What do you sense in terms of the overall trend in 2017 in terms of input costs? Don, you want to take a crack at the bat?
It's been an interesting year in the feed grain front so far. We had the all-time record large corn crop of 15 billion bushels. We're going to end the year with ending stocks of better than 2 billion, something over. So on total supply, we're very comfortable. At the same time, corn futures have been trading virtually unchanged or very close to year-ago levels with that huge supply on hand. A lot of that variation in the market has come from really severe pressure on cash corn basis levels. What that tells us is we're still seeing a good underlying global demand for feed grains. That probably, and that combined with the basis signals, we're not encouraging producers to have an overly aggressive or feed position on hand, but we would like to have some feed position on hand with the opportunity to build if market starts to rally.
Yeah, and what's this I hear about the soybean market, though, really taking some corn acres out of production potentially? Is that fair?
That's very fair. You know, our Rabo estimates are that we will likely see 2 million acre reduction in corn acres this year. There are other firms that are talking as much as a 4 million acre reduction in corn acres. The 2 million might be conservative today given the corn bean price spread. 4 might be a little extreme, but certainly the market's sending very strong signals to pull some of those corn acres into beans. The market with $10, $11 futures, the market's also been giving producers a strong signal. You better be selling some of these beans at these prices.
Yeah, fair enough.
I was going to just add one other thing to the comments about input costs. From a feedlot standpoint, the corn is one of our inputs that we start with. But Kevin had addressed that the discount futures will help bring cattle forward, but it also affects what they're going to pay for feeder cattle. And the reason is because the cattle feeding crush, we're going to be a lot more sensitive to it now. And if I can't buy an animal like we've had the last couple of years and lock in a break even or some kind of profit, feeder prices are going to have to come down. So when we talk about input costs, those discount futures that have a good side to it also have a limiting factor with respect to input costs of feeder cattle.
Well, certainly all the economists are suggesting that we're moving from a time in the cow-calf sector of some record profits to really the first year of some projected losses for cow-calf producers. Clint, what suggestions do you have either from a cost standpoint or from a premium and value standpoint that can help at least mitigate some of that loss or maybe put us into the black?
Well, I think every producer is going to have to sit down and analyze their own program. But they've got to start, my advice would be start with eliminating the costs that are the most egregious that you can identify right off the top, whether that's management practices we do or not investing money where we need to. You know, there's my grandpa used to say, if you invest in rust, it'll fade. So invest in what doesn't, like Kevin was saying earlier, you know, that way we can utilize those services that are going to best return the dollar to us, or at least they're going to lock in the most amount of risk for the buyers buying our cattle and keep us current in the market regardless of where that goes. Because a cow-calf producer can't manipulate the market with his product. He's just got to try to be as competitive as he can each given year.
You know, we went through a time when it didn't seem like there was much benefit of getting external helpers to assist us in risk management, and because in fact the cattle cycle seemed to be broken and all the projections were out the window. What is your sense or your recommendation about the value of services that can help us manage volatility and risk? Don?
Given that I was in the subscription business for a lot of years, but I'm not today.
Okay.
I think it provides very valuable input to producers that as producers spend their day with management decisions and fixing fence and employ all the issues you deal with, a hired consultant, they're totally focused on the market and have a background to address it. The one last point that I would make on that, when looking for a consulting service, I think a lot of people get a name from the banker or from a friend and just say, hey, I need to subscribe to your services. The personality profile and the risk profile of the risk management manager will ultimately align with the customer. Interview, get 6 or 7 names. Interview several people. There's somebody out there that you will be comfortable with, and you can take advantage of it.
And Larry?
You mentioned something about that at Cattlemen.com. My daughter's a psychologist, and so what she's done is we have a profile section on our website to determine what kind of personality you have. Are you a lion? And give you this personality so you can work with them. And at Cattlemen.com, our focus is on managing risk. And within that, I think whether it's us or anybody else, you've got to find somebody that has what we call strategies. And on that, you've got to have somebody that has discipline. My biggest challenge as a broker, that I've been doing this for 43 years now, is lack of discipline. They're traders that are by nature, they're traders in cattle. So when they get to futures, they tend to want to do that same kind of thing, and they shouldn't really be doing that. They need to identify the risks. We look at 3 of them: profitability, price risk or opportunity, and basis risk or opportunity. We focus on those, and if we don't have a trigger from that response, you don't do a thing. And then the bottom line is discipline. At cattlehedging.com, we have a product called hedge positions. So the feedlots upload their cattle into hedge positions. This allows us to now be this consultant that Don was talking about, where we can see their cattle, how many they have coming out, what are their break-evens, what percent hedge should we be, and start following these disciplines that I think are lacking in the cattle feeding industry.
Kevin, anything to add?
Well, at CattleFax, of course, obviously we've been doing this for almost 50 years, and what I would suggest from our perspective is, cattlefax.com. We have a new interactive website that's going. We also have an app that can be downloaded, and that app is free to all cattlemen, and so that keeps you abreast of the market. One thing just to ask yourself, if you're a producer, you're spending your time producing a product. If you're a cow-calf producer every day of the year, how long are you thinking about the marketing aspect? And a lot of times that marketing is taking the cattle to town the same Thursday in October, or putting them on the sale at the same time every year. There's a lot more, the seasonality, the longer term cycle. There's a lot of things that I think we or anybody that's providing market analysis and risk analysis can provide for that producer.
Great comments. Thank you guys so much. Now, still to come, we'll be diving into crop prices and what impact that can have on the beef industry. Plus, a closer look at the export markets and their role in adding value to beef cattle. Don't go away. We'll be back with more right after this.
There is a saying, hay lost in the field robs yield. That's why John Deere balers are designed with tightly spaced belts so you capture more crop in every pass. Compared to other balers with wide-spaced belt designs, John Deere balers let you put up more quality hay and put more money in your pocket. That's how we run. And that's why nothing runs like a Deere.
Do you really think that's a good idea?
If everyone jumped off a cliff, would you do it too?
You'll lose interest.
It's just a phase. It hurts me more than it hurts you.
Where are your manners? Were you raised by wolves?
You're gonna give me a heart attack.
When you have kids, you will understand.
This is the life of a rebel. Sorry, Mom.
Welcome back. Today, we're focusing on cattle markets and how they're shaping up for the industry in 2017. We've had a good conversation about the grain market and certainly talked about the depressed cattle markets that we've been experiencing. And I guess the one silver lining is that there was plenty of forage this last year and pretty cheap hay. What's your sense moving forward?
We're still in awfully good shape. Certainly with the rain event that's occurred in the far west, California should be much improved this year from what they've been for a number of years. And the balance of the country, not only do we have good subsoil moisture conditions, but we still have a lot of hay stocks on hand. So hay outlook should be pretty comfortable.
That's great. Let's talk about hedging and contracting strategies. What would you recommend producers consider as they think about managing their risk in 2017? Larry?
I talked previously, the biggest part of it has to have discipline, what I call as a hedge policy. You've got to define some things that force you to have triggers to make decisions. Profitability is one of the biggest ones, but the amount of times you can lock in a profit is less than 40% of the time the day you buy your cattle. So you've got to look at some other ways to manage that risk and identify them. And price risk is one of them, basis risk and opportunity is another one. So the key thing has to do is find someone that you can consult with, get some disciplines, and once you have a trigger, respond. Don't get caught up in the emotion of being either bullish or bearish. I have a lot of my guys selling into weakness and killing themselves, and turn when it's up in good profits like it's been now, they just fight it because they get a little bit too bullish.
Yeah. Kevin, you have anything to add?
No, I think he hit the nail on the head there as far as the mentality of the cattle feeder or cattlemen. We're always bullish at the highs and too bearish at the lows, and those are all good points. From maybe a bigger picture cycle standpoint, after 2 years of a big drop, we're finally getting to a price level in here where the market should have a little less volatility, be a little more range bound as we go through 2017 and 18. Not that we won't continue to trend lower from a cycle standpoint, but the bulk of the down is already in. And with that being the case, especially as we think about the cow-calf and the stocker producer, another thing that we might have to take a hard look at is retained ownership. Some things that when we talked the last couple of years, a cow man was making so much money, it was a no-brainer to go ahead and sell those calves. Now, margins might be a little tight. It might be time to take a look at retaining ownership as we go over the next couple of years.
That's a great point. And Don, I'd point another question to you. You know, I've heard and read a lot about the futures market and people saying this thing's broke. What's your sense? What could be improved or should be improved relative to the futures market to make it a more attractive risk management tool again?
You've been holding out on the tough question, Kevin. The contract has served the industry very well. I'm in no way going to go so far to say it is broken, but if you look at the transition of the industry to more formula sales, more carcass-oriented value determination, is it time to really take a hard look at the contract and make long-term objectives? Yeah, I believe it is.
Yeah.
Kevin, for 43 years I've been a futures broker, managing risk for producers. And one of the words that's really interesting that they tend to forget about is it's called futures. It's an anticipatory market, okay? So the producer who's so in tune to what the market cash is doing right now sees this futures market as doesn't realize it being an anticipatory market. So it'll lead the market down, it'll lead the market up. This shifts the basis, right? And this anticipatory market, which we call futures, is a good price discovery model. It led the market down to where it should have gone to realign retail margins, packer margins, and fed cattle prices, okay? We forget about that. We forget that we're comparing an anticipatory futures market to a actual cash, and we sometimes think, well, the futures isn't doing what I want it to do. It's never going to do what you want it to do, okay?
Yeah,
it's going to do what it perceives the cash is going to do, not necessarily what the cash is right now.
That's good guidance. Thank you, guys. Still ahead, we'll discuss exports and how much value those add to our cattle prices. Stay with us.
There is a new world out there, revealing itself in unpredictable ways. A world that demands more from the land and those who grow, farm, and build on it. This new world calls for the ingenuity to get more out of it, while preserving as much as we can. After all, to stay ahead of tomorrow, we need to be equipped for it today. New Holland, equipped for a new world.
No storm is too powerful for new Purina Wind and Rain Storm Minerals, formulated with ultimate weather resistance. That means more minerals in the feeder and available to your cattle. Wind and Rain Storm Minerals provide more consistent intake and balanced mineral nutrition to optimize herd health and breedback rates. See the difference at your local Purina dealer or visit cattlenutrition.com. Wind and Rain Storm Minerals, another way Purina is building better cattle.
You're watching NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen on RFD TV.
Welcome back. We've talked a little bit about the ups and downs of the cattle markets and some of the factors that go into those price swings. And now I'd like to talk a little bit about exports. You know, it's been one of the bright spots in the market, especially fourth quarter. We have export values adding about $300 to the price of a fed steer, Kevin. And what's your sense of where we're headed in 2017, both in terms of value and volume?
You bet. We're pretty optimistic on the export front. Of course, you know, nobody knows from an administration standpoint, but as you think about it, we're going to have ample supplies and prices generally at or below a year-ago level, so we're pretty competitive on the global stage for beef despite the strong dollar. Typically, exports, access to different countries are a key component. We had huge increases last year to both Japan and South Korea. We've got to remember that Australia, which we compete directly into those two markets, is in the process of having expansion, so their supplies are tight, prices are high, so we're very competitive into those two markets as we think about it for 2017. So we've got Volume's up about 5 to 6% for 2017 for beef, and we think on a per head value it'll increase to about $320 versus $300.
That's good news. So you mentioned the value of the dollar, and Don, I just ask you, you keep your pulse on the global market and the global economy. What's your sense of the impact of the global economy on U.S. beef?
I think guarded optimism. We're seeing some better spending numbers out of Japan. We closed out the year with GDP numbers in China certainly at the more positive end of expectations. Australia still kind of struggling to stay out of recession, but doing so. Clearly looking for growth in South America, specifically Brazil for the year. We're still seeing the effects of the Trump bump on the U.S. economy, and we're seeing some effects there. So really, overall, globally, pretty positive. Europe's still a bit of a question of where we're at. But as I started, I think globally, guarded optimism.
Very good. I go to some meetings. I constantly hear about Brazilian meat and the imports of beef into this country. What's your read? I mean, how big impact is that having on U.S. cattle markets today, Kevin?
We need to remember the Brazilians have a quota. They're in the other category, so that number is pretty small. The biggest driver of imports would be lean 90% trim, and Australia would be the destination where most of that product is coming from. As I mentioned earlier, they're in the process of rebuilding their herd. Their prices are relatively high, so they're not as competitive coming into our country. Last year in 16, final numbers looks like imports are going to be down about 11%. We forecast in 17 they'll be down another 7%. And again, there's a strong correlation there between domestic cow slaughter, which we see increasing in 2017, and imports. If we produce more grind ourselves, we import less. So that correlation would suggest that imports will be down in 2017.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. We'll have more insights from our panel of experts, including their thoughts on herd expansion, right after this. Stay with us.
This is yours, and so is what grows there. Not theirs or theirs, yours. You need this to fight this and this to grow more this. Because the more of this you feed them, the less this you spend on that, which leaves more of this here. Don't let them take this from you. Chaparral takes care of weeds and brush, and that's that.
There are many great reasons to join NCBA, and that includes exclusive NCBA member discounts and benefits from some outstanding companies.
Hi, this is Kerry Bastine, president of Roper Apparel and Footwear, Stetson Apparel Boots, and Tin Hall. We are very proud sponsors of the NCBA, and for all new members signing up with the NCBA, you get 50% off your first purchase, and for all Go Forward members, you get 25% off 4 times a year. Go to urbanwesternwear.com, click on the NCBA specials, use your coupon code for your first 50% off, and come back to Urban Western Wear all year long and use your 25% coupons that you'll find in the National Cattlemen's newspaper.
Big discounts on boots, clothing, and Western apparel is just one of the many amazing deals you get as an NCBA member. Don't miss out. Join NCBA today and enjoy these exclusive member discounts. Find out more at beefusa.org.
Welcome back to this special edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen, as we get insights into the cattle markets from a great panel of experts. You know, just a couple of years ago, Kevin, we sat on a program like this talking about a 29 million cow herd, record low cow numbers. Did we expand too fast, and more importantly, where are we headed?
Yeah, it's a good question. And the expansion in the last 2 years in particular, we're now in the 3rd year of expansion. But the last 2 years have averaged close to 1 million head of beef cows a year. So from a historical perspective, that's pretty rapid. And because of that, as we talked earlier, we have paid the price from a price standpoint. Nonetheless, as we look at industry profitability, we still have a calf market that this year we think is going to average somewhere around $1.50, and for the average producer, that's a break even to making some money. So where we're at today, you think about it, yeah, it was rapid, but it's driven by profitability. And as we go forward in here, you still have good favorable weather patterns, low input costs from a feed standpoint. You look at the data points, cow slaughter, even though it's going to increase in 17, we don't forecast that it'll be big enough to liquidate. Heifers on feed, 2% bigger than a year ago, but still very low from a historical perspective. So all the indications are that we'll continue to expand here in 2017 at a slower pace than the last 2 years, but still continue to expand.
I just wanted to add to that what Kevin talked about. As an analyst, one of the things that I had to learn a long time ago is when we're looking at all the numbers, we've got to not take the human element out of the decision making, because if there's an incentive, he will expand. And so we can't just look at the numbers by themselves. We've got to look what's going on in the response by human nature. When we're making money, we're going to expand. When we start to lose money, we contract. So human nature's and their behavior is really important in outlining this expansion and contraction.
Great point. And you know, one real interest that I have is the younger producers. We've seen a lot more young producers kind of get involved over the last couple of years and get excited about the cow business. Clint, what guidance do you give the younger producers that may have expanded the last couple of years and are trying to figure out where to from here?
Well, I think the biggest challenge facing agriculture, and it doesn't matter what segment you're in, is the age of the average American farmer and rancher. We all know that's the 800-pound gorilla in the room that we're all going to have to face. But I think now more than ever there is great opportunity in this business. That doesn't mean that this year's not more challenging than others, but they've got to stay engaged. Hopefully find some mentors that can help bring them along. Stay engaged in their local and national cattlemen associations like NCBA, because the things that they need that are going to drive their biggest amount of success is beyond the grasp of within their fences. But they've got to control their input cost and invest in what's really going to make a return and start out slow. Got to have a great relationship with your lender. That was one of the hardest things that I had to learn was to being able to sit at a table and look across and explain where you're going and what you're doing and have the lender have your back.
Is that right, Don?
Communication is the key.
Fantastic. A good baker.
What I was going to add is cattlehedging.com is going to roll out a learning center this year to take that younger cow-calf, rancher, feedlot, who's going to take over this next generation of agribusiness. So we're going to take the information we've learned over these years, we're going to build a learning center. There'll be videos that you can go and learn how to manage risk and teach this new young generation about agribusiness.
Young and old, we all have lots to learn. Thank you, guys. Now, don't forget, if you want to keep up on all the latest news in the cattle industry, just visit NCBA's website at beefusa.org. And for more expert analysis on the cattle markets, be sure to visit cattlefacts.com. Now, don't go away. We'll be back with our good friend Baxter Black right after this.
Want more profit out of your pasture? Then here's our 2 cents on using parasite control to make some dollars. In a trial of calves, Long Range outperformed Sidectin and Safeguard dewormers combined by as much as an extra 40 pounds. Yeah, that's a lot of extra profit, and that's why it pays to treat cattle with Long Range. Do not treat within 48 days of slaughter. Not for use in female dairy cattle 20 months of age or older, including dry dairy cows or in veal calves. Post-injection site damage can occur. These reactions have disappeared without treatment. You can't afford another season without Long Range.
Don't miss the 2017 NCBA Legislative Conference in Washington, D.C. It's your opportunity to meet with key congressional and federal agency influencers and let them know where cattlemen and women stand on critical issues that impact the cattle business and our way of life. Make plans to be in Washington, D.C. March 28th through the 30th for the 2017 NCBA Legislative Conference. Together, we can do more. Details at beefusa.org.
Calves require adequate, high-quality colostrum immediately following birth to receive the immune and nutritional support needed to fight diseases and thrive. Next-generation Colostrix colostrum replacer and supplement are USDA licensed to aid in the treatment of failure of passive transfer and contain natural maternal bovine colostrum antibodies against E. coli K99. Ask your animal health supplier for Colostrix or visit agrilabs.com for details. Colostrix makes all systems go.
We know who made that hitch. We know who cut the steel, who milled the ball, and who welded the seams. We know who tested, measured, and checked. We even know who thought the whole thing up. We're B&W, and we know your hitch. Because we don't make them halfway around the world. We make them all right here. B&W. Trusted.
Several years ago, there was dissension at the rancho. I had overheard murmurings in the barnyard regarding my stock trailer. The grumbling animals enlisted my teenage daughter to present their complaints. In my defense, let me describe this trailer the way it used to be. I felt like it was a real bargain when I bought it. It was an 18-foot Hale with a bumper hitch. Upon purchasing it, I made a few minor repairs. 3 of the wheel bearings needed replacing, but the left front still spun good. We put plywood over the rotting floor and bought an inner tube for the 2 new recaps that didn't have any tread left. I put down a rubber mat on the slick plywood after a horse came loose in transit and slid from front to back going up a steep grade. Every improvement an investment, I always say. My daughter's list of complaints seemed trifling. The horses, she claimed, were embarrassed to be seen unloading. She suggested I repaint it. Well, trying to get along, I pulled it down to the sandblasting guy for an estimate. He recommended against it. Apparently, he was afraid it would cause structural damage. To remove that much rust would weaken the steel. Admittedly, there has been some erosion. This complaint was brought up by the cows. They worried about sliding a foot through that 4-inch gap that circles the trailer. I've always looked on that gap as good drainage. And I take it the boys at the sale barn agreed too, since they've named my trailer the Valdez. Perhaps my daughter had her own motives. I noticed she wouldn't even tie her horse to the trailer at a roping or a horse show. I offered to paint her name on the side, give her some pride of ownership. She said, no thanks. I've always admired her modesty. Being a good ranch boss, I considered their grievances, but I had good reason to avoid any hasty decisions. The Valdez was perfectly suited to my pickup. It was a classic, with good tires and a fully functional left-hand side mirror. Besides, the annual registration for the trailer was only $13. This is Baxter Black from out there.
Thanks, Baxter. We always enjoy your segment on our show. And we'll be back with more right after this.
I'm an NCBA member because NCBA, they look at the facts, they look at the history, and they look what's good for the industry.
It's important to be NCBA members just because of what NCBA does. They keep us informed about a lot of things that are going on nationwide.
The reason we're an NCBA member is we think that it's the best voice that the cattle people have.
Join NCBA today. Head to beefusa.org or call 866-USA-BEEF.
There are many great reasons to join NCBA, and that includes exclusive NCBA member-only discounts from Cabela's.
We have an exclusive membership program that allows members of NCBA to buy our Cabela's co-branded gift cards at a 15% discount.
Use gift cards towards Cabela's purchases either online through the catalog or in-store. NCBA members can also purchase logo apparel from Cabela's at a discount.
And we do all of the NCBA's merchandise through the website. In that program, you can receive up to a 30% discount through the NCBA site. We have state association logos, all the Beef USA logos. We can use those to outfit your guys working on the ranch. Cabela's is proud to be a sponsor of NCBA and all their member base.
15% off gift cards to Cabela's plus savings on apparel is just one of the great deals you get as an NCBA member. Join today at beefusa.org.
Welcome back. As we wrap up our program, I'd like each of our panelists to share some of their final thoughts. Don?
Well, we've got so much uncertainty in the marketplace today in regard to ag policy, a lot of domestic policy, a lot of unknowns. We really have to think that at the end of the day, economics will rule, and we'll probably come out of this with much more stable markets than many are fearing today.
That's good news. Larry, what would you add?
I think the word agribusiness is what I want to focus on. It's kind of two parts. Part of it's the agri part, which is the production side. The other part of it is the business side, and I'm not sure that they combine that well enough, and I'd like to encourage them to take that production side and be the businessman, manage the risk, identify a good business plan, a good hedge policy, and be disciplined about it.
What would you add, Clint?
Well, following up on what Larry said, one of the strategies that cattlemen need to do is to market their cattle, not sell them. Remove the emotion from it. Kevin mentioned earlier we spend all year producing this product, and most of the time we just show up on the day we sell them and take whatever we get. The next few years are going to be a time where we're going to see great spreads in the price of cattle. Already through our system on Superior Livestock, it's nothing to see $100 spreads on the price of cattle that are differentiating the difference between value-added programs and marketing versus selling.
I read something that straight roads are for fast cars and curved roads are for fast drivers, and I think we're going to need some fast drivers, aren't we?
Right.
Kevin?
Well, I'd just leave us with the thought of just to remember where we're at within the cattle cycle, not only cattle, but the protein cycle. So as we go over the next couple of years, we'll have some challenges because we have increasing supplies. To offset that, we need to recognize how important that trade piece is. You know, we set in here and we consume roughly 215 pounds of protein per capita. We export about 36 pounds of protein per capita. So that export market is extremely important. Hopefully over time it continues to grow to allow all three proteins, in particular the cattle side, to continue to expand at a profitable level.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much for your insight. I know this has been very educational and informative to me and our viewers. Now don't forget, every day the NCBA staff in Washington, D.C. and in Denver is working to protect the interest of cattle producers all across the country. Join in the fight to protect our way of life by becoming an NCBA member. Just call 1-866-USA-BEEF or go online to the website, that's beefusa.org. Well, that wraps up this edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. Again, a big thank you to our panel, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next week, right here on RFD TV.